Ahoy there! Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another ship fitting guide for EVE Echoes. In today's video though, rather than taking a look at one specific ship, we're going to be looking at an entire line of hulls. The Hurricane line, to be precise, in case you hadn't guessed from what we already have on screen. Now, this line of ships holds a very special place in my heart. It was one of the first real ships that I flew in EVE Online and allowed me to get revenge on the guy who had been camping me every time I jumped into nullsec. And it's just been one of the most versatile and fun ships I've ever flown, both in EVE Online and in EVE Echoes. When EVE Echoes launched, I knew it was a ship I wanted to fly, and I actually dedicated an entire alt to flying just this one hull type. And basically, that's what we're going to look at today, how to get started with the Hurricane, with the Tech 7 Hurricane prototype. Then we'll have a look at how that compares to the Tech 8 Hurricane, and then take a brief look at the Tech 9 Hurricane Logistics and Tech 10 Hurricane Guardians. Talk about what these ships do, how you can use them, and why I think they are some of the best and most versatile vessels in EVE Echoes. Now, if you do enjoy this video, please let me know by hitting like on it, sub to the channel for all things EVE Echoes and EVE Online, and make sure to ding that notification bell. Finally, if you do want to go the extra mile to help support this channel, you can do so by joining us at Patreon. The details are on the bottom of the screen and in the description. You can pledge support there, and we do even have a Redbubble merchandise store where you can buy exclusive Silent Rose merchandise. Yes, I'm that obsessed with this particular ship. Anyway, folks, all of that said and done then, let's jump right in to talking about the Hurricane. The Hurricane line of ships are found in the Minmatar Republic ship tree. They're battle cruisers, so we need to look at the battle cruiser line, and as I said, they start at Tech 7 with the Hurricane prototype. So let's have a look at this. Now, the Hurricane itself as a ship, I love the visuals on this thing, that kind of spearhead approach to it, kind of like an arrowhead, the sort of fins and panels down the side. It just looks angry, it looks sleek, I love this design so much, and I love the different skins and that we can get for it as well, though I'm not really going to dwell on those overly long. Now, the Hurricane prototype is a ridiculously good ship for the tech level that you're able to acquire this at. You can use this quite comfortably to do Tech 8, even sometimes Tech 9 level content if you're careful enough. I do Tech 8 smalls and mediums in this thing fairly frequently, and it'll actually run some of the T6 specials like Inquisitors and Scouts if you are very careful with what you're doing. This is a ship that when you fit it correctly will actually take you surprisingly far. Looking at its stats here, we have 6 high slots which are designed for medium cannons, 3 mid slots, and a pretty good 5 low slots, which gives us quite a bit of versatility there in regards to things like your E-War and your propulsion, weapon upgrades, and tanking. Of course, there are 3 of each of the rig types, because that's where we're at in the tech tree at this point in time. We have a sizable cargo hold, 850 cubic meters, and a pretty solid defense of 27,135. By the time you hit Tech 7, this is probably one of the tankier ships that you've flown at this point, and it does pretty well. If we have a look at the shield and armor, you'll see that both of these are actually pretty close. The shield is bigger at 8,266 compared to the armor's 7,358, but it is actually still possible to armor tank the Hurricane prototype if you are interested in armor tanking, if your skills are that way inclined, and if you're going up against content where that makes sense. So for example, if you're based out in a Mars base, going up against Sansha and Blood Raider rats that are doing laser damage, then yeah, by all means feel free to armor tank this. Capacitors are middling to okay. We're looking at 2259 gigajoules there, with a decent maximum capacitor recharge rate of 10.7 gigajoules per second. We get 6 locked targets, which means theoretically every single one of those high slots can be firing at something different, though why you would ever do that I don't know, other than for the lols. It is a large signature radius of 202.3 compared to everything you'll have flown before it, but that's just because it's a battle cruiser. As far as battle cruisers go, that 202.3 is actually really small, and it only gets smaller as the Hurricane line increases. Scan resolution is also on the sort of middling side of battle cruisers at 238. We get a decent enough warp speed at 2.7 astronomical units per second, a very good flight velocity of 200 meters per second, and solid mass and inertia that means this is actually a fairly agile ship. If we go into the trait descriptions, first of all, we have a load of roll bonuses that are what I refer to as the hurricane bonuses, which are that we get a 25% increase to medium cannon optimal range and a 25% increase to medium cannon accuracy fall off. That means both autocannons and strike cannons get some pretty nice range bonuses here that will help this to apply damage at much better ranges. Then, from Advanced Medium Cannon Upgrade, and I'm assuming that before this you're going to have been flying something like a Stabber, therefore you should pretty much have those medium cannon skills already trained up by the time you hit this, we're looking at Advanced Medium Cannon Upgrade, giving us a 5% increase to medium cannon damage and a 3% reduction to medium cannon activation time. Now, the increased medium cannon damage is nice for both autocannons and for strike cannons. Obviously, 25% additional damage is nothing to be sniffed at. It's more than an additional turret at this point. Then the 3% reduction to the medium cannon activation time works more in the favour of autocannons, which want to be firing quickly and rapidly, rather than strikes, which tend to be focusing on trying to get a higher alpha. Again, it does work for both, but that does definitely seem to favour more along the lines of using autocannons. Finally, Battle Cruiser Command, Basic Battle Cruiser Command, is going to give us an increase of 5% flight velocity per level, 25% in total, on top of that 200 meters per second standard. So you should comfortably be hitting 250 meters per second, plus obviously the bonuses that you get from Battle Cruiser Command directly. This is a fast battle cruiser and actually flies as fast as some cruisers from other empires. Obviously, it's a Minmatar ship. Speed and small is what they do very, very well. So, this is where you start with a Hurricane prototype. Let's actually jump into the fitting tree and have a look at how this works and how we're going to fit this. Now, again, as I mentioned, you can go for strike cannons or autocannons here. I am going with autocannons because strike cannons on the prototype are difficult to fit in. Ultimately, you are going to need something like a metastasis rig or a power grid rig in order to squeeze everything in that you want. And considering the Hurricane prototype's sort of bonuses and that, I tend to think that the autocannons do work a little bit better here. Now you'll notice that this fit is done entirely using Republic Fleet and lower level gear. The idea of this is that I want to keep this really cheap, the kind of thing that you probably have access to around the time of getting the Hurricane prototype. So we've got Republic Fleet medium autocannons, 6 of those in the high slots. You can see that with the stat bonuses that we get from the Hurricane here, we've got an optimal range of around about 3.5 to 4 kilometers, which is standard for using autocannons, but a very long accuracy fall off. So from about 3.6 kilometers, you're doing 100% effectiveness. That 17 kilometers additional there takes you all the way out to 20 Ks before you finally are gradually reduced down to 50% effectiveness. That means if you're sitting anywhere in the 5 to 10 kilometers, you're doing pretty much most of your damage. It's a very forgiving fall off range there. And that's one of the things I love about medium autocannons and the Hurricane in general, thanks to those bonuses that it gets to both its optimal range and to its accuracy fall off. Accuracy fall off, of course, is a stat that does, again, insinuate that we're looking at things like the autocannons more than strikes. Optimal range is the stat we look for strikes, though, so it does have both, but ultimately, it's getting some nice benefits across the board there. Now, for the low slots, because we're a fast-moving ship, we can actually sort of speed tank some of the battleships that you'll come across at this kind of tech level. So, a Republic Fleet medium afterburner is going to assist us doing that. I've gone for a Republic Fleet gyro stabilizer here just to help up the amount of DPS that this ship can put out. This can be swapped for a medium capacitor battery if you're a bit more worried about your capacitor or you want to mix around the mid slots, as we'll talk about later. Capacitor is, of course, life in EVE. I find that a Republic Fleet gyro stabilizer lets me kill things that little bit faster, and I'm not too worried about my capacitor. I can pretty much hold my own with things as they are, but if you have lower engineering skills, for example, you might want to swap this one out for a battery. I then have 2 Caldari Navy adaptive invulnerability fields. With both these acting, we get some pretty nice shield damage resistances across the board there. That means any damage we take is significantly reduced. And then finally, for the low slots, for a bit of a change of pace, we have a Republic Fleet large shield booster. The Hurricane prototype, once you've got a few levels in battlecruiser engineering, can fit a large shield booster on it. And yes, this is going to force you into cap instability, but you just need to cycle it it when and if you need it. One cycle will boost up your HP by an astonishing amount. So you just wait until you need it, you activate it once, you turn it off, and then you let your capacitor recharge until you need it again. And it's active, but it's not a difficult thing to do, as you'll see in a moment. If we're looking at the mid slots, this is where things can be mixed around a bit more. I've gone for 2 Imperial Navy medium energy Nosferatus, and yes, they're Imperial Navy. I'm just going to imagine that I blew up an Amarr ship and I've claimed them there. Totally didn't buy them off Jita, probably from an Amarr player. 2 medium energy Nosferatus just to help recover that capacitor a bit more. Now, I said earlier you might want to swap your mids. If you are swapping the gyro stabilizer out for a battery, you can probably drop the second Nosferatu and swap that for another web. I've gone for a single Republic Fleet Stasis Webifier here. This is usually enough to hit the ships that I'm going to be flying against at this particular skill level. That said, if you are struggling here, that second web you can put a second web on to replace a Nosferatu, and then just put a battery down here. Just make sure that if you're struggling, if you've got a web on the target, hit approach on it as well, or even switch your afterburner off just for a moment to drop your angular velocity and help your autocannons to apply their damage that little bit better. Finally then, a Mark 9 Valkyrie, or probably a Mark 7 Valkyrie by the time you get this, to be fair, fills up that final slot here. There's no need to go for Republic Fleet on this. They're very expensive and the DPS extra just isn't worth it on a ship like this. Moving into the rigs, again, I've gone for cheap versions here, the cheapest I could get sort of within reason. So I've gone for a collision accelerator and a burst accelerator. This is your typical DPS setup. It means your cannons are doing more damage and they're cycling faster, which of course means more lead through the air, more damage that way. And a core defense charge economizer, so that when we do activate that shield booster, it's boosting even more shield. In fact, you can see here, 924 HP per boost. It is a big boost that we're getting from that booster. For the engineering rigs, I've gone for a semiconductor memory cell 2 and a capacitor control circuit just to assist with capacitor. Battlecruisers do tend to have capacitor issues, especially when you're newly flying them, so these are rigs that are well worth getting just to help your capacitor recharge that little bit faster. Finally then, I went for a dynamic fuel valve, which has just again helped my capacitor out. That afterburner is going to be running most of the time, so having the reduction there to the amount of capacitor needed to run an afterburner just makes more sense, and it allows us to keep not capacitor stable by any stretch, but it means we're not actually going to run out of battery. If we have a look at the stats here, talking about capacitor, you'll see it does suggest 3 minutes and 6 seconds. But remember, that is with absolutely everything running. That's assuming that you are using the stasis webifier at all times, and we'll turn that off when we're up against things like battlecruisers and battleships that we're hitting without the need for it. Obviously, we're going to be running the afterburner. We're going to be running the 2 adaptive invulnerability fields constantly, but this is assuming that 3 minutes 6 seconds that the large shield booster and the gyro stabilizer are going to be constantly on as well, using the gyro stabilizer every time it hits cooldown and just leaving the shield booster running, which we never are. You should take a little bit of damage, activate the shield booster to top yourself off, and then wait until you need to use it again. You'll stay capacitor stable for, well, pretty much the entire fight. Offensively speaking, 795.04 including the drone, 773 just from the turrets, I don't think is bad at all. We've got some solid defenses there, and this is me docked before putting the adaptive invulnerability fields on. Targeting is pretty good. Again, we're a fairly large ship at 202 meters, but we've got a good scan resolution there of 302 that allows us to lock on nice and quickly. Finally, navigation, 355 meters per second as standard. That's before activating the afterburner. As I said, this is a surprisingly nimble ship, and it can do some surprisingly high content stuff, and we'll showcase that now. Now this is just a standard Tech 8 Gisty small anomaly, and you can see that I'm really not struggling in this whatsoever. We're about to come into the final wave now. I'm brawling, I've got my auto orbit set to 5 kilometers, and I just literally hit a new target, I tap orbit on it, and well, like here you can see I'm locking on, and I'm looting as I go. Now, you might sit there and say, well, what's the point in looting? You can actually earn a lot of ISK through this. Grab the loot and then reprocess it. In addition to the bounties, you can actually earn a pretty penny on the side there from the ores. Anyway, so we lock onto our new targets, and I tend to try and go for some of the cruisers and that early on. Cruisers, destroyers, and frigates tend to be my first targets, because large weapons, I'm moving fast enough that I don't really worry. You can see the afterburner is active 24/7 here, and I've got both of the adaptive invulnerability fields running. I've also currently got a web of fire running on the slasher here. I am missing, so I kind of want to look at approaching something else, or like approaching the target itself to reduce my angular velocity, but I eventually catch it. We're now going to move towards the Gisty Talwar there at 13 kilometers, and there we are, just insane amounts of damage. Cuts through this nice and quickly, down it goes, and you'll see that I'm not actually taking all that much damage at all here. I think I've had to cycle my shield booster once so far. My capacitor is nice and stable here, sitting on 72%, and we're just slowly pulling these, well, not even slowly, we're pulling these targets down one by one. And again, if I'm here at now like 15 kilometers, 13 kilometers, I'm still doing good damage because of how the fall off works on autocannons. Getting a couple of grazes and glances, but getting some smashes and some hits there as well, which is always nice to see. That Bellicose is about to go down. We're within 9 kilometers, should be able to loot that as soon as it drops. There we are. Possibly just gone out of range. Nope, we're going to grab it in time. Excellent. And move on then to that Rupture and just keep pulling it down. You can see I'm just not really worried. The 2 Nosferatus are keeping me topped up nicely. I only have to cycle the shield booster sort of as and when I need it. The gyro stabilizer's off cooldown, so I can pop that in a second and just, pump out a bit more damage. I haven't probably noticed at this point whilst I'm filming this that gyro stabilizer's on cooldown, but I'm pretty sure at this point you can see this is comfortably doing Tech 8 smalls. Tech 8 mediums get a bit more sort of like, oh, that's a lot of damage, but you don't ever hit armor as long as you're careful with your capacitor. And you can get down to tier 6 Inquisitors and Scouts, and that way lies some really good ISK. That is an excellent way to make ISK at tech level 7, tech level 8. Give it a try, just have someone nearby to bail you out the first time. Just, stay safe the first time, but once you've tried it, you should find that you're capable of doing it as long as you're careful with it, and it's an amazing way of making ISK. There's a lot of money to be found in doing exactly that. The Hurricane prototype at tech level 7 should keep you going comfortably all the way until you hit tech level 8, and heck, possibly even a little bit longer if you need more time to save up for the Hurricane hull itself. Now, the Hurricane at tech level 8 obviously looks visually identical to the Hurricane prototype, so we're not going to worry about that. But if we go into its attributes and fittings, you'll see that we get a big buff to the power grid, which is necessary because we've now got a 7th high slot to kick out a bit more damage. We've got 3 mid slots and 5 low slots again, same as we had before. Cargo hold is the same as before, but we do have a significantly improved defense as well, going up to 29,810. You'll see the shield has now cropped over 9,000, and the armor has popped its head over the 8,000 mark. Again, you can shield or armor tank these, depending on your skills and depending on the type of content you're going after. Obviously, shield tends to be what most people go for with this because it's the bigger HP, but armor will work. Just bear that in mind. The capacitor bank has improved as well, 2,363. Capacitor recharge rate is fairly similar to what we had on the prototype though. Still only 6 locked targets, and our signature radius though has dropped down. We've gone below the 200 mark now to 192.9 meters. Still a solid scan resolution of 238, warp speed remains at 2.7, flight velocity has a minor increase to 203, mass and inertia are pretty much identical. So what we're essentially looking at here now is a faster, smaller version of the ship with higher defense, better capacitors, better power grid, and a 7th high slot. What happens at the trait descriptions? Well, we've still got the Hurricane roll bonuses, the 25% increase to medium cannon optimal range and accuracy fall-off, and the ability to fit command bursts. I don't really recommend fitting command bursts. In PvE, if you're going solo, then you're not really getting much of a benefit from them, and they're very expensive skills to train, and they're going to chow through fuel. On the other side of things, if you're in a fleet, then chances are you've got a command vessel with you, which is going to do it better than the Hurricane is. That said, if you really want to use command bursts, be aware that the Hurricane can. It's interesting to see though that Advanced Medium Cannon upgrade this time around, it's a 3% increase to medium cannon damage rather than the 5% we had before. We still get a 3% reduction to medium cannon activation time, but why has the cannon damage gone down on a higher level ship? Well, simply put, it's because you've got that 7th slot, whereas before you were getting a 25% increase on a 25% increase on 6 slots. Here you're getting a 15% increase on 7 slots, which does actually work out quite beneficial. Then we still have that 5% flight velocity from Battlecruiser Command. It's basically a direct upgrade here, the Hurricane from the Hurricane prototype. And if we go into the fitting menu, we're going to pretty much fit it the same way as before as well. You can see here, I've gone for Gistum C-type medium autocannons in the high slots this time. For the mid slots, I've only got 1 Nosferatu. I've gone for 2 Predator Stasis Webifiers because we're going up against higher tech level anomalies with this. That means I'm going to need to be able to pin down things like the Tech 10 Interceptors. That absolutely requires 2 webs from me at this point in time. Now, thanks to the bonuses that we've got here, you can see the capacitor actually is holding okay at 2 minutes 23. That's still using a large shield booster here, a Gist C-type now, and only 1 of the Nosferatus in the mid. Again, if you're worried, if you don't have quite the engineering skills, you can swap out the gyro stabilizer in the lows here for a capacitor battery. It'll fit in the power grid quite comfortably. Otherwise, it's all the same as before, but I've gone up to C-types where we can. Now, you might think that, hang on, you've done all of that, but we're only getting a small amount of well, not a small amount, we're only getting a few hundred extra DPS, and you've got a nano core on this? Well, yes, if we go into my nano core, I've been upgrading this one. It is mainly cannon damage, a bit of tracking speed, and a tiny bit of shield there, and I'm not sure what the next one is that I'm going to go for. We'll decide that eventually. But you might be thinking, surely this should have a bigger upgrade on the damage, and that's because of how I've rigged this one. You'll notice that I still have a cannon burst aerator, which is now a burst aerator 3, and I still have the shield boost amount bonus here, 30% the core defense charge economizer, but I've now also added a core defense capacitor safeguard. This is because in Tech 10, I find I have to run that shield just a bit more often, and I'd like to try and keep as capacitor stable as possible. It basically means if I were to drop this for something like a collision accelerator, then I would need to put a battery here instead of the gyro stabilizer, and that's much the same, except the gyro stabilizer is a lot cheaper than using a battery and the cannon collision accelerator, so you get very similar DPS and capacitor either way that you do it. It just works out cheaper this way, and watch as the markets change, as they do every time I talk about this kind of stuff in a video. For the engineering, it's still a semiconductor memory cell and actually, it's 2 semiconductor memory cells here. I should really change one of those for a capacitor control circuit, as it will give me better capacitor stability, and it's a polycarbon engine housing I've gone for this time for the inertia modifier adjustment, just to help me navigate and approach and move away a little bit faster. Again, you could go for a polycarbon engine housing here. It's much the same. By using that same kind of fitting as we used on the prototype, you're getting higher DPS here, 1024.48 out of the cannons, 1046 overall. We've got a solid defense there of 44,000, that's 1,000 more than we had before. And that's before we put on those boosters, remember, the adaptive invulnerability fields, which are going to push that up even higher. Capacitor is only 2 minutes 23. Again, you can put a battery in here if you wanted to. We can even swap this out for like a dynamic fuel valve to help with the capacitor a bit more that way, but I find this is absolutely fine. Targeting, we've got a better scan resolution than we had before, smaller signature radius, and navigation is even faster at 360.32. And as I said, this will now do Tech 10 smalls and mediums, and will do Tech 8 special anomalies. Now, this combat demonstration is going to look pretty much identical to the one we've just looked at Tech 8, but I do get complaints that I haven't proved myself if I don't show this kind of stuff in the video itself. So here we are in a Tech 10 Gisty small anomaly, just to show that the small is no problems whatsoever. The mediums, again, you can do a medium in this, but I just want to show how easy it is to do a small first of all, so that people understand kind of the differences that you're expecting. And if you're new to a Hurricane, then you're going to want to start with the smalls and then work up from there. So again, down goes the last battleship of the previous wave. I'm looting everything because I'm orbiting at 5 kilometers around things, which means I'm in loot range. When a new wave spawns, we go for the small ships first. Gisty Slasher Interceptor there. Now, I do hit it and blap it off quickly. I don't really need to worry about approach, although I am now approaching the Gisty Talwar 2 Assault. You'll see that with the approach, with the 2 webs going there, this will go down quite quickly. There we are, it's about halfway down now. 2,725, not quite enough to take it off the grid yet, but bang, down it goes. We're about 88% on the shield, one activation there of the shield booster, and suddenly I'm back up to 95%, and, you know, again, my capacitor's holding pretty steady here, with one battery, with one Nosferatu, sorry, just to keep me going. Now, as we thin the herd, we start to take less and less damage. I can still loot as I'm going there because I'm 4 kilometers away from everything. Grey loot, yeah, okay, it's nothing exciting on its own, but it reprocesses pretty well, especially if you've got skills in that. And I'm just going one at a time, blapping through everything. This entire encounter, a small anomaly here, takes me, I think it's about 18 to 20 minutes, depending on how much attention I'm paying, and it's really quite safe. I've left the shield booster running here. You can see I don't actually need it. It's dropped me down to about 50% capacitor, but you'll notice that when I do spot that, my capacitor actually recharges pretty quickly, but for now, oops, I've left that running. I'm down to 45% capacitor. I will spot it in a moment, probably around the time that my ship stops screaming at me that it's running out of power. Nope, there we are, 40%. And we're going after the tornado. Here you can see obviously I was distracted, I've flown out of the orbit, I missed that shield booster, and I've kind of obviously looked back across the screen and gone, oh, oops, I forgot that, and now I'm orbiting at the correct range again. I've got the cruiser wreck there that I'm now going to loot, and on we go. And that capacitor is refilling nicely. By time the tornado is down and I'm just orbiting the Maelstrom with that Nosferatu going, it's gonna push me right up. One quick cycle there of the shield booster, and I'm up to 97% shield again, and off we go. Really, really simple here, nice and straightforward. Tech 10 smalls and mediums, and you'll do Tech 8 specials in this particular ship. It's also pretty comfortable for PvP, and you don't really need to change all that much. You might decide to swap out the afterburner for a micro warp drive, for example, but this is a viable PvP platform as well, and it just looks amazing. Yes, I've gone for a hot pink look on this one because it is the Silent Rose. Now, before we go further, I also want to talk about a strike cannon fit on the Hurricane, because this can be very useful in PvP, and in certain PvE fleets, it can be beneficial as well. This fit, again, will basically do the same level content that the Hurricane prototype will do, but faster. It isn't quite capable of doing Tech 10 smalls. It's a bit squishy for that, even at the ranges that we're going to be using, but it will do Tech 7 and Tech 8 content comfortably, and sort of Tech 6, Tech 7 specials, which again are a great way of making money. Jumping into a Tech 7 special like an Inquisitor or a Scout with this fit, you can do it very quickly, loot everything, and sell your gains on the market. Now, to showcase the strike cannon fit, I think it's obviously worth just talking about the strike cannons briefly and what the entire point of them is. Because if you look at the DPS here, you've seen that I've got the Hurricane with autos that we've just looked at doing just over 1,000 DPS. Here the strikes are only doing 683. Or 661 just from the strikes. So is this really worth it? Okay, yeah, they're doing that from a range optimal of 37 kilometers with a fall off of a further 35, so you're at 70 kilometer range before you're hitting 50% effectiveness here. But is it really worth the loss in damage? And the simple answer is yes, when you're looking at the alpha. Now, annoyingly, EVE Echoes doesn't show you alpha as a flat stat like it does in EVE Online, but here, if we were to have a look at this, you can see that the 318, 216, and the 318, let me spend a moment here and actually pull up a calculator so I can do this right. If we go in, that's probably the exact number I needed there, 318 plus 216 plus 318. That is our alpha strike per Gistum C-type medium strike cannon. We then have 7 of these, which means our cold alpha is 5,964. And of course, that's our cold alpha. That's before we activate both Republic Fleet gyro stabilizers, and we can even add the Marketeer tracking computers, or Eagle if you can afford them and have them lying around. I didn't. These will give you extra range, this gives you extra damage. It's a better application, better overall damage. And it's all about the alpha. The aim here is that you should be able to take out certain ships in just 1 or 2 volleys, and that works out better than a higher DPS situation, especially if you're going in fleets and you have a particular target that you need to get rid of. I would rather have 3 Hurricanes with strikes lock onto one target and remove it from the grid instantly in one shot than have 3 autocannon Hurricanes that need to get closer and will take a lot longer to do that. Heck, the DPS might be double on those autocannons, but if they need to, cycle 3 or 4 times, it's still going to take 4 or 5 seconds to delete that target, whereas the single, cannonade of strike cannons would have taken that target out instantly. That's the purpose of Alpha. And to help facilitate this, we've also got 3 Republic Fleet target painters to make sure we 100% apply that damage to the target that we're firing at, and a micro warp drive just to help us with range control so that we can sit at the ranges we need to be and make a quick getaway. This is all about sort of a hit and run style. Now, for the rigs on this one, I've gone for 3 cannon collision accelerators. This is just to push up that alpha to the highest possibility. Now, the third collision accelerator there does have some rather nasty penalties on it, thanks to the sort of stacking penalty. You might decide you'd rather switch that out for something else. I don't necessarily recommend a burst aerator because, again, that's just making you reload faster when the aim is that you want to kill something in that first shot. You could go for something like some form of shield upgrade on this. I could even suggest something like the one that adds additional fall off, just to make sure you're getting even more damage on a target from further range. For the engineering rigs, an ancillary power grid router is required to fit all of the modules that we've looked at. A targeting system subcontroller 3 fits here just to help us lock on faster, and a polycarbon engine housing to allow us to run away that little bit faster if we need to. Now, you might decide that actually, rather than the power grid, you want to put the metastasis adjuster on here to help you fit those strike cannons in, because they have insane power grid. But ultimately, I found that this was the best way to do it, because I would rather have the extra damage there. The third rig, I wasn't really convinced there was anything I really needed in that third engineering rig, so the extra damage there felt like the better choice. And it is a lot of alpha, especially once you activate those 2 gyro stabilizers. You can do an insane amount of damage with this, and so a small fleet of these can really pull down some very large targets in a frighteningly quick time. Your defense leaves a lot to be desired, because we've got no tanking modules whatsoever here, no resistance boosts, nothing. This is pretty much naked as far as it comes to taking damage. The capacitor is not particularly stable, but again, it's hit and run. The targeting is good. We've got a decent scan resolution here. You could decide you want to up that a bit more if you really need to lock onto something quickly, and blap it that way. Navigation, though, again, nice and fast. Get into position, blap something, move out of the way. Now, whilst I don't want to dwell on either of these ships, as they have had dedicated videos fairly recently where I talk about them, it's worth noting that if, like me, you're a fan of the Hurricane hull, then at tech level 9 you also gain access to the Hurricane Logistics, and at tech level 10 we have the Hurricane Guardian. So what are these about? Well, the Hurricane Logistics is, as it says on the tin, it's a logistics vessel, which means it's all about repairing up the friendly ships. If you look at the Hurricane Logistics stats here, then the roll bonus of its additional range on medium cannons and the optimal range and accuracy fall-off has now been replaced with a 600% increase to remote shield booster effective range, and a 75% increase to group shield booster effective range. We then also have a 75% increase to group capacitor transmitter effective range, which means your mid slots on this are probably going to be looking at using the group shield boosters and group capacitor transmitters in order to keep your friends all topped up with HP, shield HP with the group shield booster, and additional capacitor with the transmitter. And the high slots are going to, of course, be medium or large shield boosters, remote shield boosters, with that additional range bonus there to make sure that you are absolutely keeping everyone in your fleet covered and topped up. Then advanced remote shield operation, 15% increase to remote shield boost amount, so you're going to be boosting them up faster, and a reduction in the amount of capacitor needed to run those remote shield boosters, because those things chew capacitor like it's going out of fashion. Advanced Battle Cruiser Command then is going to further increase the remote capacitor transmitter effective range and the remote capacitor transmitter transfer effects. That's the amount of gigajoules it transfers to the targets, or rather everyone in range's capacitor. The Hurricane Logistics, in a nutshell, is an absolute beast, and that's not even talking about the fact that you can actually fit this thing with missiles, and it makes an excellent bait ship. Or rather, it used to make an excellent bait ship before everyone started doing it, and now you see a Hurricane Logistics and you instantly know that's a bait ship. Now, the other one to talk about then is the Hurricane Guardian, and I have a lot of fun with this one in PvE fleets. Being a Guardian ship, of course, this has the ability to fit shield field modules, which we've covered elsewhere in a Catskull Academy lesson talking about how those work. You do get your medium cannon optimal range and accuracy fall-off buffs back, and under Advanced Battlecruiser, we're getting medium cannon damage and medium cannon tracking speed. The trouble is, we only have 4 high slots, so it's just not really a DPS ship at all. This is here as a platform for that shield field module, protecting the fleet around you. Whether you put strike cannons or auto cannons into those high slots is not really important. I tend to go for auto cannons in case there are any frigates or anything that get inside the bubble, but equally, you could go for strike cannons to make sure that you're able to shoot enemies that are outside of the bubble just as well. So it's really neither here nor there, because the fleet around you is going to be doing the damage. You are just adding supplementary to that. You do also have the Advanced Battlecruiser Defense upgrade of 7.5% increase to shield boost amount. Now, normally a Guardian requires a logistics vessel to back it up and sort of keep it repaired on account of you taking the damage for the entire fleet. Rather than your fleet taking damage, you're taking it all yourself, and even though you've got very high resistances, it's still a lot of incoming damage. Here on the Hurricane Guardian, that shield boost amount means that your own shield boosters are going to really help you stay alive. It's just then a case of capacitor worries, which in fairness isn't too bad with the Hurricane Guardian either, because most of the modules you're going to be running are actually pretty capacitor light. You're not worried about high slots doing anything. You know, your mid slots are mainly the shield field, which relies instead on fuel. You don't need to worry about things like neutralizers and that. The rest of your fleet have you covered. It's only really your tanking modules and maybe a prop mod that are going to be chewing capacitor. So having that shield boost amount just really helps you to take care of yourself. You can still bring a logistics friend, but they might find that they're not really doing much just because you yourself are boosting yourself up nicely. And that's the Hurricane. I absolutely adore these ships. These are my favourite hull in EVE Echoes and in EVE Online, and I'll probably do a video in EVE Online soon once I get my Hurricane up and running there. I love the skins you can get. I love the versatility here. This ship works well as a brawler. It works well as a sniper. It can work well as a kiter. It does PvE. It does PvP. And if you're training into the hulls, you can also end up being both a logistics vessel and a Guardian vessel, which means there is always a place for you in the fleet. You can either be long-range DPS, short-range DPS, tank, or healer. You fill all 4 possible roles. The only thing you don't do overly well is the ability to fit command bursts. You can still fit them though, which is more than most ships in the game can say. You're just not as good as a dedicated command ship platform, but hey, if your fleet doesn't have a dedicated command ship platform, you can even fill that role. That's why I love the Hurricane. I would love to hear from you guys which ship you love most. What is your favourite hull? What do you like best? And why? Do you agree that it is the Hurricane? Because if you don't, well, you're wrong. I'm kidding. There are plenty of good hulls. This is just my own personal favourite. I love it to pieces, and I hope you guys can find some enjoyment out of this as well. Anyway, folks, thank you for watching this one right the way to the end. Let me know your thoughts and opinions. Otherwise, happy sailing, and see you in New Eden.